Papa took me to the Museum of Fine Arts each Saturday and took lessons in drawing and modeling in clay. When we hiked in the Blue Hills of Boston one day, I thought of the Vienna woods where Susie and I used to play. 5 years later, we became proud citizens of the USA. Until her 100th birthday, Moni voted each election day. When I turned 16, the promise I had made came true. I left Vienna and Boston, my two cities, old and new. We had made a new home in Boston with our whole family. It was Mutti, Papa, Susie, Moni, my doll Lily, and me.
Since the Treaty of Versailles was signed in 1919, there have been only a few really momentous days in the history of Europe. Mussolini marching on Rome, Stalin launching his first 5-year plan. So without comment, we present the story of Germany's march into Austria.
The memory was that my sister and I were in a dance recital, and we went with my mother on the streetcar to the hall, and hardly anybody was in the audience except a few parents. And on the way home, we noticed that the men had turned the lapels of their coats and to show the swastika. It was the first time I saw the swastika, and my mother looked rather distressed. And then we heard planes overhead. We got home, and on the radio that evening, Schuschnigg gave his abdication speech and said that he wanted to prevent bloodshed, and so he was allowing the German armies to come in. So subsequently, there were parades of German soldiers and airplanes overhead and all that, which I remember. The day after Hitler came into Vienna, my father started going to the American consulate to begin trying to get out. And it was made very difficult, even though the Nazis didn't want the Jews, but they wanted to make sure that it was hard to get out. They wanted their money. Things started to really go from bad to worse. I mean, my father couldn't work, you know, and Jewish women were forced to scrub the sidewalks and all kinds of really trivial things, but that were, you know, very degrading. There was a burning of the books because there were house searches, and my father had a lot of left-wing literature, especially a journal, which he burned, and of course books burned by Jewish authors and so on. And so downstairs in our apartment house overlooked the park, but downstairs on the first floor was the Jewish preschool, or was called a kindergarten, where I had attended when I was 4 and 5, I guess. And one day we were at my uncle's house in another part of the city, and our cook from Izzy called, and she said, "Don't come home because the SS is here, and they're plundering the kindergarten. Everything is out on the street, all the furniture, everything, and they're moving in." It's true that the headquarters, or one of the headquarters of the SS, was installed right downstairs in our apartment house, and that was scary. The worst things was that one's friends turned away. So the children that we had played with had to turn their backs on us because the parents were afraid. So then we took the train through France. And of course there were many refugees on the ship. And from the ship I remember that it was very stormy and many people were seasick, and I stayed in the cabin and played with my little animals. I think maybe the next day we took the train to Boston. On the train, we looked out of the window, and there were all these houses that had fallen down and trees that were fallen down. We said, what kind of country is this? So my father sent Susie, she was the only one that knew English, to ask the conductor, and she came back and she said, hurricane. But we didn't know what a hurricane was. But that was the famous hurricane of 1938 that came all the way up the East Coast. So when we got to Boston, then we moved into this really disgusting, it was a hotel in Brigham Circle. I don't know if it's still there, but I think that's the first time I really felt homeless, you know. And I remember putting chairs up, you know, like in a circle and sitting in between the chairs because that was a kind of protection. And I can't tell you, it must have been hard, but they eventually found a furnished apartment in Brighton on Washington Street, 127 Washington Street, still there. And we moved there. As we were moving in, it just so happened that a Viennese family was moving out, and my parents had known them. Their name was Karplus, and they had two sons who were the same ages as Susie and I. And so they were our first friends. And Susie and I and Bobby and Martin went every Saturday to the Egyptian Theater in Brighton Center to the movies. And that's where we learned English. But my mother thought they were children's movies, but they weren't. But we had to go every week because there was this serial called The Hawk of the Wilderness. And so he would either be falling off a cliff or something, so we had to go the next week. I went to the Harriet A. Baldwin School in Brighton, which is still there. And the teachers had no concept at all of a child who doesn't speak the language. So they just spoke louder. In this class with a lot of children, and the only thing I knew how to say was, I understand. But I meant to say, I don't understand. So I'd say, I understand. So they'd say, oh, she understands, you know, bup, 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 and they'd start talking. So after we came, you know, both my sister and I were involved with our friends and adjusting in school. And at the time, we never gave credit to my father, who not only was responsible for us kids, his wife and his mother-in-law, but also received countless letters from Austria, from friends and relatives. And he went through tremendous effort to get people out. And I mean, that is also a credit to his American friends who signed affidavits that they would be responsible for these people. So not everybody got out, but 17 families got out because of my father. It's only recently that I've become more involved with my memories of my past. I don't know. It's maybe when you get older, you start thinking more about your past. I don't know. Or maybe it's because it's ancient history for some kids now, and maybe they should know about it. You know? This is a picture of me and of my sister on the ship coming over to the United States. The ship was called the SS Washington. And we came here in 1938. So what I was thinking of telling you is what my memories are as a child. No, we were not very devout. We had Passover. We celebrated Passover last time in April and blacked out all the curtains because we're not supposed to do it. My father didn't know Hebrew, but he said something in German. And then at the end of the service, it's always a next year in Jerusalem, but he said a next year in America. So my father was very, very smart. And the day after Hitler came into Vienna, he started going to the American consulate. I have 4 kids. My youngest son, we adopted from Korea, so he's half Korean, because I think in Korea there was a lot of prejudice against half, mixed. Yeah. Mixed. My daughter-in-law in California is a high school teacher in Santa Rosa High School, and for the I think I've done it now 3 times. I've talked to her classes. Her classes last year, particularly, were mostly immigrants, either Hispanic kids from Taiwan, from from the Far East, generally, from Russia, and I spoke to them, and I got the most terrific letters back. Of course, she made them write letters. She made them write thank you notes. But some of them were really interesting, and saying that they really wanted to tell this story to their friends so that it wouldn't be forgotten. So I think it's important, so that it won't happen again.
Hörst du den Tango Marina, das Lied einer Sehnsucht, die nie sich erfüllt? Hörst du die Stimme des Herzens Marina, die dir das Geheimnis